Okay, so we're going to start today with a shape tween. It is not the most user-friendly tool. There's some things that you can run, some issues you can run into that we'll go over, but it's basically morphing one object into another. It works best for more organic shapes, and you'll see why as we go through it. So you're basically, it's not a motion tween, it's a shape tween, and it's morphing one thing into the other. So you can really choose whatever you want. We're also going to do clouds so you can see. It's really good for like natural stuff, and you can see how that could be really beneficial in a lot of different animations. It's pretty cool, and it makes things look maybe a little more realistic or natural. So let's get started. I'm going to make a new action script, and when I make a new one I can come in here and change it, but in case you're starting from the other window, I will change the size here in the properties. So just double clicking on here and doing 1920 tab 1080. And then we can come up here and fit it in the window. So right away I'm just going to change the stage background, and I'm going to make it a blue. And if you, I don't know if we've gone over this before, but you can also come into this little color wheel in the color selection and change it even more, so you have a lot more options here than what are just in the swatches, so you can really get the exact color that you want. Okay, so what's important to remember for a shape tween is that we're using solid shapes, solid objects, and they can't have holes in them. So we're going to be using the brush tool, which is B on the keyboard, and remember that paints with fills. So once I click on the brush, you can see, I'll click out of it, and pay attention to down here on the very bottom left. Once I click into it, all of our options show up. One important thing is you want to make sure object drawing is not on. The default, it should be off, but you want to make sure it's not clicked on, or that's going to mess you up. That's for programming, which we don't need to worry about. And then here you can change the brush size, and here you can change the brush shape. I am going to change my brush shape to this oval one. And I'm going to draw this little pine cone that is going to turn into a tree. For this, you can use a tablet, which we have in the computer labs, and there's pens to take out. And I'm using a mouse right now while I'm doing this, so it's not going to look the greatest, but I'm going to just draw it the best I can. Okay, so I stopped the video because I really didn't like the way that looked. I'm clicking on it and pressing delete, and I connected my drawing tablet because I want it to look a little bit better, and I have a little more control with the drawing tablet. So I'm just going to draw the basic shape of my cone. And think about something that has a simple shape and that can turn into something else that also has a simple shape. And you can see I'm taking some time to just make sure that it is all filled in. The shape is all filled in. Okay, I don't want to spend too much time on this because, you know, I could go on forever creating this little pine cone. But the important things here are that it's a smooth, solid shape, no holes. You can also come in with the eraser tool, which is here, that is E on the keyboard, and you can erase small sections. So with both the brush and the eraser, you can be using the right bracket key to make it bigger and the left bracket to make it smaller. So you can do a combination of erasing, and it looks like it's erasing the background, but once I release the eraser, it's not. So you can do a combination of painting and erasing to get your shape right, and obviously you're going to spend a lot more time on this than I have right now. So think about that. So now we need to come up into the layer. I'm going to double click on it and name it, or I'll just name it Cone Tree, and we're going to make it a shape tween. So all you do is right click and create shape tween. And you can see what happens is it doesn't make, a motion tween would make that solid bar. With the shape tween, that doesn't happen. So we have to come out, I'm gonna come out to 2 seconds here, and I'm just gonna press F6. And now we have that solid bar, and we can see there is an arrow here, and that is our shape tween. Okay, so now in this 2-second keyframe, this is where we're going to draw the shape that it's going to morph into. And in my case, it will be a pine tree. So I'm going to come back into my brush. I'm selected on this, we can see the dots in there. So I want to just click on my move tool, which is V on the keyboard, and make sure I'm selected out of that before I change the color. So I'm going to press B to get into my brush. I'm going to come and select a fill color, a green for my tree, and there's a couple things that can go wrong here, so we'll talk about troubleshooting. First, I'm just going to draw the tree, and obviously you can do whatever you want for yours. And it helps if the shape that the tween is turning into, that it's morphing into, is kind of a similar shape to what it's starting out as. So I have my pine cone, like the little cones are sort of pointing up, and I'm making the branches on my tree point up for that reason. And I'm again making sure I'm filling everything in. And this is really going to depend on what yours looks like. So again, I can see some holes there. Make sure to get rid of those. Make it a nice solid shape. And I'm just going to make this a long tree trunk here. Okay, so I don't love the way that looks. I'm going to come in with the eraser. I'm just going to press E on my keyboard, and I'm going to clean up the edges a little bit. And when you're doing this, this is a good reason to remember key commands. And then I'm going to come back in to B for my brush, and I'm going to make sure I filled in all those holes. You can take time and zoom in and stuff and make sure they all look good. I'm going to press V, and I'm going to select my pine cone and delete it because we don't want to see that at the end, so I'm just going to press delete. So let's see how that looks. Okay, we got some holes, and that is not what we want. Okay, so what happens is there is a hole in here. So because there's a hole, and I can kind of see where the hole is because it's because the pine cone is showing up as a hole in that morph. So I'm going to come to my end keyframe where my tree is, and I'm going to zoom in, Control plus, and I'm pressing the space bar to get this hand, and there's our culprit, that small hole there. So I'm just using the brush to fill that in. And I might, I think some of this like detail might be messing me up, so I might just fill some of this stuff in. Let's come out and see how that looks. Okay, so I'm gonna come to fit to window. Let's see. There we go. So it was just that hole. You can move stuff around and have it however you want. I could barely see that hole, so make sure if that is happening, just check and fill in any holes. And also, sometimes it was happening with me earlier. Let me show you one of these tests. Yeah, so it was happening there. There was a little hole, so you can just fill that hole, and you can kind of, as you scrub through, see where the issue is happening here. So then you can zoom in and fix it. I think I have another one. And then this one didn't have a hole in it, but see, I made my branches of my tree like kind of too scraggly and too detailed, and it just looks kind of funny. Like that looks super messy to me. So that's why in the later ones, this was the first one I did, and I was trying to make it detailed, and I think all these blocky edges just make it look messy when it's morphing. So just to whatever shapes you end up morphing, just be thinking about the amount of detail you're putting in and what kind of holes it has and how the beginning shape is going to match up with the ending shape, because all that stuff is to be taken into consideration for this. So that is our shape tween. That's it. And you can extend it out longer if you want to. I'm also going to show you how to make those clouds, because I think that is a fun one that you can use a lot. So make sure to be Control S, saving a lot. I'm going to turn or maybe I'll leave the tree on, but I'll lock it, and I'm going to make a new layer here and call it clouds. So with the clouds option, this is another way to make a shape tween, and it's a way to make it where we're using the first starting part of the morph and just using it and changing it a little bit. So we're not making, like how I made the pine cone and the tree, we're not making two separate things. We're just changing the first image. So I'm in my brush tool, not the paintbrush tool, the brush tool, that's B. And I'm going to pick white for the clouds. And then I want to change my brush here to the round brush. And you can make it bigger with the right bracket key. And you can just make your cloud shape. Oh, I went back to my mouse and it's not as fun, but here we go. It should be simple, simple cloud. And again, same thing. I want to fill it all in. I'm just gonna make it maybe a little more interesting, add a little more to the cloud. Okay, so that's the starting point. I don't see any holes, but we'll find out soon. Okay, so I am going to right click here, create shape tween, and then we can see it's just a dotted line, but I want it to be that arrow. So I need to come to the 2-second mark and I need to press F6. But nothing's happening because I haven't made any changes to my cloud. Actually, I'm going to turn the eye off on the cone because I think that will be a little distracting while we're working on the cloud. So here I am at 2 seconds, and I'm going to come to my move tool, and I can first drag it along, and then we can adjust it. You can either use the free transform tool, or I can right click, transform, and you can just try distorting it, but I want you to try the envelope. So this gives you a lot of options. It gives you some handles, sort of like if you're used to Illustrator. You can also pull out these squares to adjust the entire shape, and you can make it look like it's sort of like moving in the wind. And then you can take each of these points, each of these dots has a handle attached to it that you can make significant adjustments to. So take time to work on that, and let's see how that looks. That's already looking pretty good, like a cloud moving in the sky. If I wanted to make it slower, I could click on this keyframe where it's 2 seconds and drag it. Let's try dragging it to 4 seconds. And that's just going to make it move slower across the sky. So however you want, whatever kind of windy day it is. And you can of course have it here going off the scene, and then I can come back to my first keyframe and have it starting off the scene. So let's see how that looks. And then you can come anywhere in the middle and add more keyframes. So anywhere you want, I can press F6, I can right click. Let's try distort just to show you what that looks like. So this is what distort does. So maybe we want to go this way because this is the way the wind is moving. So you can start with one, and then I can right click, transform, and use the envelope to even make it more distorted. So this is a good way to use shape tweens, and if you have your solid shape set up, you don't have to worry about the second shape being, you know, matching up and looking right and having the right amount of detail and stuff. So let's see how that looks. Always be testing. So I'm coming back to the beginning, pressing play, and that's pretty cool. So I think you can see how you can make a whole sky of clouds doing that, and you can do clouds for this one if you want. I think that's a really good thing to practice. And you can really do whatever you want. You could do anything in nature that's moving. You could try grass or leaves. You could even do like a cartoon character that's like head is growing or belly is growing. Just pick stuff that's organic looking, and that will work the best. Okay, so the next thing we're doing is kinetic text. So we're making this text move. We're going to do the typing, and you can really get as creative with this as you want. And so this can be a separate video. You can do it as a totally separate project from the shape tween, or you can make them work together, which I think could be really cool. That's up to you and your creativity. You can do it however you want. So I'm going to come into this where I did the clouds earlier, and I'm going to lock and turn off those layers, and I'm just going to do mine on a new layer to keep it simple, and I'm going to call this text layer, and then I'm going to make a new symbol. So I can come to insert, new symbol, and I'm going to call it placement. And it's a graphic symbol. So this is going to be the placement of my text. So I'm going to press OK, and I'm going to take the text tool, and I'm going to start writing. So, and then I'm going to just adjust the font size and the font type, which you don't need to watch, so I will pause. Okay, so I got all my fonts set up the way I wanted them to be, and then I'm going to come back into my scene. Let me come into fit into window, and I'm just going to drag the placement on and see how big it is in the scene, and that looks pretty good. I can make it bigger, coming back into double clicking in the placement if I needed to, but I'm for now going to delete this out of the scene. So this text layer in my scene is blank, and then I'm going to double click back into placement, and I'm working in the library. This is going to be a library animation. So I want to make that really clear. I'm double clicking on placement, and I'm not in the scene, I'm in this library animation where I have a whole new timeline and different layers that we're going to create. So what we have to do here is we have to break apart all of the words and put them in their own layers and make them symbols. So we can zoom out to set it up. So I'm going to move this one kind of over to the side, and I'm going to be copying each word. So I'm going to copy it by doing Control X. So what Control X does is it copies it, but it also deletes it. So Control X, and then I'm going to come out here. I'm in my text tool because I've highlighted it. So I'm just going to double click with the text tool out here. And you don't want to draw out a text box because it might not be big enough or it might be too big. So you just want to double click so you have this single line here. And I'm going to do Control V to paste. And then I'm going to come and to my move tool, and you have to click on the move tool here so it doesn't type the letter V. And I'm going to line it up where I want it to be. And then I'm not done. I need to make it into a symbol. So you can right click, convert to symbol, or since we're going to be doing this a lot, and yours might be longer because you can do any kind of quote or song lyric, anything you want. Yours will probably be longer than mine. It's also F8. So just get in the habit of pressing F8. It converts it to the symbol, and I'm just going to call this 1 because you could have plenty of them. It's a graphic, the default, that's good, and press OK. And we can see 1 is here, and on layer 1 is going to be my first symbol that I've created. And then with each one that I copy, it's going to delete off of this layer 1. So layer 1 will end up just having the plant on it, the first word on it. So now I'm going to come back and I'm going to pick my next word or phrase, and I'm going to Control X. I'm going to make a new layer. This is really important to do all these steps. So I'm going to create a new layer. It's automatically called layer 2. I'm still in my text tool. I'm double clicking and I'm Control V, Control pasting. And then I'm coming into my selection and I'm pressing F8 to make it a symbol, and I'm calling it 2. It's a graphic. So the second word or phrase is on layer 2. just to keep things organized. If you have a lot, you can see if you have a lot of words going on, having them numbered is better than having the actual word, because it could get super confusing, and you might have a word that is twice. Like if I had plant again and I had two plants written here, I'd have no idea which one was which. So I think for this kind of thing, numbering them helps. So I'm gonna come back into here. I'm going to highlight this, Control X. I'm going to make a new layer. If I click on the layer 2, it will make a new layer right on top. So I'm just making a new layer. I'm in my text tool. I'm double clicking, and I'm Control V to paste. Then I'm coming into my selection, moving it where I want it, pressing F8 to make it a symbol. And this is number 3. It's number 3 on layer 3. Okay, and then I'm coming back into my last one, highlighting it, Control X. I'm making a new layer, so I'm going to click on layer 3, make a new layer. I'm in my text tool. I'm double clicking out here, Control V. I'm coming into my selection, and I'm moving it, pressing F8, and that is number 4. Press OK. So I have my 4 symbols here in my library, and I have my 4 layers up here, and they're all corresponding to each other. So you can take time to move these around. This is the time you want to really place it where you want it. So you can start rotating stuff and thinking about how you're designing. Okay, so I'm going to start adjusting this. I think I want the seed to be rotated. So I can come into my free transform, and when I hover around here on the corner, I can see that little twirly icon with the arrow on it, and that means I can click and rotate it. And I can pick that. Then I can come here. You know, think about how you want yours to look. So really set it up, take some time to get it how you want to animate it. And next we're going to create motion tweens on each, and we're going to animate each of these layers so they're moving around. So after each word is a symbol, you can see it in the symbol library. Each word is on its own layer. I'm going to click on one layer, hold Shift, and click on the bottom layer. So all of the first keyframes are highlighted. We can see all of these keyframes highlighted, so we don't have to do them individually. And I can right-click and create motion tween. And so now they all have motion tweens on them. So I just clicked on one, then held Shift and clicked on the last one and made them all highlighted. So making your words readable is a really important thing here, and I just timed myself. I got the timer on my phone on and read it really slow, so I knew about how much time I needed to give myself to make this actually readable. So I suggest timing yourself. I'm going to do 5 seconds. If you have more words, you probably want to do more. So I'm going to come into the keyframe, into the frame here at 5 seconds, and then I'm going to hold Shift and highlight all of the keyframes at 5 seconds. And then I'm just going to press F6, and that's going to extend our motion tween. So I have the time set up. And this is something you're just going to have to play around with your, depending on the side of your, depending on the size or length of your phrase. So one really important thing when you're picking a phrase, you can really pick whatever you want. Like I said, it could be a quote or a lyric to a song. One really important thing is that you do not use any hate speech. So if you have anything that is sexist or homophobic or racist or any kind of inappropriate, disrespectful speech in there, you'll get a 0 for the project, and we'll have to talk about it because we're in a professional setting, we're in school, so keep it kind. I'm not trying to censor you, I'm just trying to make sure there is no hate speech in this class allowed. And I know sometimes when you're on the internet, it can be easier to say things you might not say in person, but let's keep it kind. Okay, so now we're going to stagger each of these layers to decide where they start. So obviously layer 1 is the plant, that's going to start first. And then I need to click and I drag them out. And this really depends on yours and how long you need for each word or each phrase. I'm going to do about a second for each. And then I'm going to pull this back to 3. Maybe I want this a little longer because on the watch it one, I'm going to have that typed. So we'll see how that looks. Always be testing it. So let's just see how that looks to start. Play. And remember, we're going to animate each, so you want to give it enough time for that to happen. So each word is going to be either moving or changing in some way. You can have it just move across the scene. You can have it get bigger or smaller. You can change the opacity and rotate it. So the first word, plant, I'm going to move it and I'm going to scale it. I'm going to have it start big and get smaller. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit, just doing Control minus and then press the space bar to move this around so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, so I know I want the word plant to end up exactly here. So I'm going to make a keyframe to have it stop here. So I'm going to click where I want it to end up and press F6 because I know I want it to stop there. And then I'm going to adjust where it begins on the first keyframe. So I'm just in my selection tool and I'm just going to move it off to the side. And that just makes it move in to where I want it to go. I can also, I'm going to press the space bar, move over a little bit. I can also come to my free transform and I can have it start bigger. So I'm in my first keyframe here, have my time indicator set up there, and I can just press shift and have it start bigger, and then it's getting smaller and moving. So that's both movement and scale in that one layer. And then I'm going to come and think about how I want the seed to end up. I kind of want it to end up here. I want it to start going across normally and then have it rotate down. So again, I'm going to come to the end point somewhere around here. I'm going to click on this frame here and press F6. So I'm setting up the keyframe for the end point. And then I'm going to come back to the beginning and I'm going to rotate it and move it up. Let's see how that looks. And you can really spend a lot of time adjusting that. Also with the seed, I want to make it get opaque. I want it to start transparent and then come into full transparency. So I'm going to start from the beginning. I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see what's happening. I'm just doing Control plus. And I'm going to come out of the transform tool. So I'm here in the starting keyframe for a seed. I have to click on it. So let's see. I'm here and I don't see anything for the transparency available in my properties. What I have to do to get those properties is just click on the actual thing, and you can see that now I have this color effect option that we've used before, and under style it's alpha. So I'm going to make that start at 0. And then we can't see anything. And then what we have to do is come back to this keyframe, and I have to see in my properties, I don't see that option for the alpha for the color. So I have to click on this for that to pop up. And I need to make alpha 100. All right, let's see how that looks. So it goes from being transparent and comes into view. So I think so far that's looking pretty good. And then for watch it, I'm going to give it the typewriter effect. So I'm going to zoom in here, Control plus, Control plus. I'm going to use my hand to get closer so you can see what's going on. So I'm going to click on watch it. And we have to remove the tween for this. It can't be a tween. It's just going to be a regular layer without a tween. So I'm making sure I'm clicked on the layer I want to be on, which is layer 3 for watch it. I'm right clicking and I'm removing the motion. And then it just turns it into a regular layer here. And then we need to break up each of these letters. So I'm clicking on the word again, I'm right clicking, and I'm going to break apart right here, Control B. I do that once and it doesn't break it apart, so I need to do it again. Right click, break apart. So you have to do break apart 2 times. And now each of them is broken into its own separate object here. And now I need to put them all into their own layer to be able to make that typewriter effect. So while it's still selected, I just right click, distribute to layers. So this is going to put them each, you can see they each came in their own layer. You can expand your timeline here by doing that so you can see everything that's going on, and Animate very kindly named all of the layers the name of the letter. But what happened is they started off at the first keyframe. So I need to make some adjustments here. We can see in layer 3, which is where Watch It exists, it's kind of showing us where we had it started, so you do still have that set up from the beginning. So I want to just click, I'm clicked on the keyframe here and I'm clicking and dragging, and I'm going to drag it to that 2-second mark where I had it set up before. And then I'm going to take the next letter, which is the A, click and drag it and put it the next frame. So I'm going to have them go 1 frame at a time. And you can adjust the pacing, how fast or slow you want yours. So I'm just clicking each letter and dragging it, being sure to keep it on the right layer, and just staggering it like steps. And there we go. Let's test that out and see how it looks. So I'm going to press play. There we go. Looks pretty cool. You can obviously make it last longer. You can have it 2 frames, whatever you want. And then it's a good idea, especially if yours is super long, to create a folder. So right next to the new layer is a new folder, and I can just click on one of the letters, hold Shift, and click on the other one. So I'm Shift and selecting them, and drag it in here into that folder. And now they're in there, and I can call it 3 or Watch It, whatever makes sense for you. And now there's nothing in layer 3, so you could also remove that if you wanted, and you can just call this 3. However works in your brain, and then you can swing this open if you need to edit it more. Okay, now for grow, I'm going to come back to fit in window, and let's find, now for grow, I want it to sort of get bigger and smaller, look like it's sort of growing a little bit. So I'm on this layer. This is where I want it to start, and then I'm just going to come a couple frames, press F6. I'm going to go into my free transform tool, which is up here. It's Q on the keyboard. I'm holding Shift, and I'm just making it bigger. And then I can come just a couple keyframes, press F6, and I can make it smaller. And you can spend more time getting it exactly right, but I'm moving down the timeline a little bit, pressing F6, making it bigger. And so you can kind of see, and you can make it super bouncy however you want, but just adding more keyframes, and maybe at the end you can make it grow even bigger. So that's totally up to you. And then you can see I had it get bigger than it was originally. So I need to come to my last keyframe and get that the same size if I don't want it to go back. you can spend more time adjusting it. You can see you can make it bounce a little bit, or if I didn't hold shift, actually, I think on this keyframe I didn't hold shift and it distorted a little bit, but I actually like the way that looks because it looks like it's kind of stretching. So you can really play around with that. There's obviously so much you can do. So let's take a look. I'm gonna zoom out a little bit. Let's take a look from the beginning. So you're always making adjustments. I'm gonna press play. So the grow doesn't look so great, but it's fine for the purposes of this demonstration. I want you to really spend time thinking about what you're writing, thinking about how it looks, designing everything, and designing all the animation. So all these animations exist in this placement library animation. They all exist in here. Make sure you're Control S-ing a lot. So we can come back into the scene. Where did it go? I can go to Fit in Window if I lost it, and I can just click on placement here and drag it anywhere in the scene, and I can press play and it's gonna live in there. And now we're gonna adjust where it shows up on the scene. Okay, so I'm gonna zoom out here, just Control minus, and I'm on this text layer, and I'm gonna just make keyframes. I mean, maybe you have yours set up so it looks good, but we can make a lot of keyframes in here and adjust how it's moving around the scene and kind of zoom in. So I'm gonna right click and I'm gonna make this a motion tween. So this layer is a motion tween. I have it set up where I want it to start, but maybe I need it to actually start in here. Maybe I want it to start a little off to the side. Let's see how that looks. So plant, and then before my next word starts, I need to probably zoom in and move it over a little bit. So I'm gonna click on here and press F6. And if I wanted it to stay for a little bit, if I wanted the plant to just stay there and not move, I can press F6 again. So I have these two keyframes that are just gonna keep it static there. And then I'm gonna come here, press F6 again, and this is where between these last two keyframes are where it's gonna start to move. So I'm gonna give it some more space, and I can also hold shift because I'm in my free transform tool, and I can make it a little bigger. Let's see how that looks. And that's not so great because when I made it bigger, it really went off the scene. So I'm just gonna Control Z until that keyframe is gone. And now I'm gonna add the keyframe again, F6, and I'm just gonna move this and see how that looks. So this is a lot of adjusting. And maybe here, around here is where I can start zooming in. And I'm just gonna show you how I'm thinking. It's obviously gonna depend on yours. So I'm gonna make another F6 here, another keyframe here. And then I'm gonna make another one here because this is where I want the zoom to happen. So now it's okay, I think, if plant goes off the scene. So I'm holding shift, and I'm making it bigger. And then I want watch it to come more in the middle. So this whole part, this is where watch it starts. So I think right here, I'm going to make another keyframe, F6. And then I'm gonna make another keyframe right before the next word starts, F6, and I'm gonna move it over and press shift and make it bigger. Let's see how that looks. So I'm always testing it. And I like where watch it is, but I think a seed, the way it moved, doesn't look so great. So I'm just Control Zing to get back. And let's see what that looks like. Yeah, I think that's better. And then you can zoom in if you want here too, and let's see what's happening with grow. So that still needs to move over too. So this is actually a big pause in this. So I can always come back. I'm gonna Control S to save it. I can always come back and double click on my placement, and I can make changes to my library. I'm not gonna do that now because I think you know how to do that. So I can just be moving like this whole bar over where grow actually starts, because if we see, this is where watch it ends typing, and then we have all this space before grow starts. So I can come in here and bring this over for it to start here. But that's totally up to you, and that's gonna move all those other keyframes too. So you can keep coming back in, saving, and then going back to your scene, and it will update it. So let's see. Maybe while it's typing, I don't want too much to be happening, so I think it could start getting bigger here. So F6. It needs to move over more. So anyway, I'm gonna come here. I'm gonna move it to give space for the grow to happen. Oh, it needs to move more. Let's see. Still needs to move more. So this is all about adjusting, getting it right. And that looks pretty good. And then you're just testing. So you're just moving the keyframes around, testing it, getting it looking right. And obviously mine needs a lot more work, but I don't want to spend too much time doing this tweaking stuff because I think you guys at this point know how to make those adjustments and make yours look great. So again, you can add it to your shape tween that you made, whatever organic shapes, or you can make them two separate videos. That's totally up to you. If you do the text as a separate video, you can put a background into it. I do suggest, if you want to add a background into it, putting the background in the library animation. So double clicking into here and making a background on a separate layer. So you'd make a new layer and adding whatever image that you get from like Pixabay or whatever, just making sure it covers the whole animation so it's moving with the animation. You could also in the scene have a background that's static, but then it wouldn't move. So if you put the background image in the library animation, it will actually be moving as the animation is moving, which can look really cool. If you don't want that to happen, that's okay. That's a creative choice. You can just make another layer here and put an image in like we did in one of the previous videos. So from this point, you know how to export it as an MP4. You should have that in your notes, so I'm not going to go over that. So you'll create an MP4 and you will export it just as we've been doing all the other times. And again, if it's two videos, that's fine. Have fun and be creative.